Hello, my name is Emily, and I am the office manager at Caitlin's Place Psychology and Autism Services. One of the jobs that I do is that I answer the phone and return messages, and I often have the experience of speaking to loved ones of children with autism or other developmental or behavioral challenges. And lots of times they really aren't, those parents or loved ones really aren't sure what to do. So I get to spend a lot of time trying to answer those questions, and I consider it a privilege. It's one of the things I really enjoy doing about my job. And as I was discussing this with Dr. Josh recently, he asked if I would just make a short video explaining some of the basic things that I often do discuss with people on the phone in case it might be helpful to someone else out there. You may have seen that I attempted my first Facebook Live video just a few moments ago, and when I got done and started listening to it, there was this horrible background noise that made it sound like it was on an old phonograph or something. So I thought I would spare all of our sensory issues and just redo it briefly. So to start with, if you are concerned that a child in your life, your child or your grandchild or whoever, maybe having some developmental delays, maybe has autism, we always recommend you go to your pediatrician. That most pediatricians, we're based in Southern Indiana, and most pediatricians around here are very good about this, that they listen, and chances are, unless they really don't think you have anything to worry about, they'll refer you to a good place to go, tell you where they think you should start based on what's going on with your child. That's what happened with my oldest. I have two children on the spectrum, and that I went to my pediatrician, and he listened, and he agreed that there were some things we needed to look into. And what happened in our case was we got right into speech and OT, and then got a referral to do the autism assessment. Unfortunately, sometimes that assessment, there can be a few months of a waiting list depending on where you're going, but and there is here right now. Sorry, we're a little backlogged with COVID and just the fact that there aren't many places around here on the Indiana side that do autism assessments. It's been very popular. So we recommend that you start with your pediatrician, and he can kind of point you in the right direction. But it's okay if your child's in school or in preschool, it's okay. You can start with the school district too. You can go ahead and do both even, and just say, hey, I'm seeing some things. And what happens is if your child's going to receive services in school, they have to have a school evaluation done, but they also have to have a medical evaluation done for pretty much anything else. The school's evaluation only works for the school. If the school says your child has a developmental delay, that is not an autism diagnosis. You still have to have an autism assessment done, and that has to be done by a psychologist. So, for example, I think, if I remember right, with my oldest, I had already contacted the school to get her into speech and OT that way as well. And in the meantime, we got the medical diagnosis. So then I was able to give that to the school, which helped them with their assessment. So it's not that both can't be useful. And in lots of cases, you have to have both. You really do have to have both. But just know that they're not the same. They're not the same. The educational one is just for educational needs. The going to a psychologist is a medical diagnosis. And I know sometimes people are like, I don't want my child to have that label. I don't want to say, put my child in a box, but it really opens doors. And I will talk a little bit about that as I go on. But if your child has autism, it's really best to know and to be able to provide documentation of that, because it gives you access to tons of things that are definitely going to help your child. So go ahead and ask your questions. Maybe there isn't a reason to worry, but if they do need to be diagnosed to the child, it just feels like a series of games. I mean, it's very age appropriate, and it will give an accurate diagnosis to have those assessments done. So definitely you need to get that medical diagnosis if that's what's going on. Okay, so that's where you start. Now, the day that my daughter was diagnosed, I was not prepared for that diagnosis, and it was overwhelming, but I still walked away with a very helpful sheet of information from the psychologist, and I knew the first few things that I should do, but one of the things that wasn't on the list, and one was to contact the school, which we'd already done, But one of the things that was not on the list that I did right away was I called a friend who'd been there before, a friend who had children with autism, and that was invaluable. Just the comfort that it's okay. There's resources. It's going to be okay. You know, they're wonderful, beautiful children, and that support system, in addition to the fact that she could point me, okay, maybe you should go see this person, talk to this person. This is what I recommend when you go to the school. So if you know somebody, great. If not, you call me and I'll talk to you about it. Okay. All right. So once you have that autism diagnosis, then what do you do? Well, one of the things that hopefully any practitioner or school district representative is going to tell you is to go ahead and apply for SSI and for the Medicaid waiver. And I have to admit, this is something I drug my heels on a little bit, in part because I didn't understand how helpful this could be. So let's start with SSI. Depending, Social Security income for children is based on the family's income until they turn 18. Once they turn 18, it's based on their income. But it can be a process to be granted SSI. But once you are, you've got it. You're in the system. And so definitely go ahead and do it. You know, don't stress about it. If you are below the income bracket where your child will get money now, go for it. And don't feel guilty about it, because there are so many hidden costs in having children with special needs. Depending on what their challenges are, it can be the transportation, it can be destruction of property. That's one in our house. There can be a lot of hidden costs. So go ahead and get that. And even if it's not something they're going to use really until adulthood, the fact that you have it and can say, yes, my child is on disability, will expedite other things. The other thing is, and we live in Indiana, is the Indiana Medicaid waiver. Again, I didn't really understand what all we could have access to with this, because at the time my child was on Medicaid, and I thought, well, we've already got Medicaid. What the Indiana Medicaid waiver is it says, okay, your child is disabled. And in my case, I had done the SSI first. So I was like, and here's evidence, you know, here's their autism diagnosis from Riley Children's Hospital, from the psychologist. Here is the SSI they've already been approved from, and it expedited things with getting the waiver. But what I didn't know for the first few years before I did this was it does more than just say, okay, yes, now your child gets to have Medicaid regardless of your income. Because again, like I said, at first my child did have Medicaid already. So I was like, well, we don't need this. But actually it opens up some other things. It gives you a case manager, and this is a good thing. They're very helpful in finding resources and kind of coordinating the different disciplines that might be helping with your child. Our case manager is fantastic. So if you live in our area and you need a reference, let me know, because he's fantastic. He's a great case manager. But it also gives you access to respite care. And this can be someone, you know, there's a number of companies in the area that provide this service. So we have, we've had her watch our children for years, but now she's old enough. It's a friend of the family that is our respite worker. And she sometimes picks up my daughter from school for me if I need to do something else, or, you know, if you just need a break. And when I was first told about it, I thought, well, no, we've got this really strong family support system. We don't need respite care. Yeah, you do. You need respite care. You should at least have it as an option. I mean, it can help with a lot of things. So, and then it also gives you access to some other things, such as PAC, which is another therapy that can work with your child on community skills and on goals that they're working on that you've discussed with your caseworker. It also can give them access to recreational therapy, which we can talk about briefly in a minute, but it gives you access to other things too. So it's worth doing, even if you don't think you need it. Oh, we have another insurance. Well, it'll cover whatever your other insurance doesn't. So definitely apply for that. Okay, I'm off that soapbox now. All right. If your child is not yet 3 or younger, I recommend reaching out to First Steps, that they can help you with some of the therapy options or point you in the direction of other things. One of my children was young enough to have First Steps, and it was really helpful. And I'll refer to that probably in a minute. If your child is 3 or over, then you're going through the school district. That's who's going to, as far as the state goes, provide any services. So my daughter got access to speech and to OT, and actually here there's a developmental preschool that she went to where the speech and OT were integrated into, and it was such a fabulous thing for her. They really helped with potty training and, all the things you would expect in preschool as well. So it was a fantastic experience. So under 3, reach out to First Steps, 3 and up, reach out to the school. But at any age, there's independent resources available too. So let's talk about that briefly, but I don't want to overwhelm you. But I do want you to have a little quick overview of what is available to you as far as therapy options go. There's some therapeutic options that have proven dramatically effective for kids with autism. Of course, there's no cure for autism. There's still a very fragile beginnings of maybe an understanding of why we have autism. There's no cure, but some of these therapies can be incredibly effective. I think sometimes it's tempting to say, well, that child has autism, so they can't da 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 da, or they won't da 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 da, or they will always da 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 da. And that can often just be not true. That it's amazing how many kids we've seen come through the doors of our practice that have made huge strides between what the therapy they receive from us, the therapies they're receiving other places. I've certainly seen it with my own children. It's amazing what can be accomplished. So do not underestimate these therapies. But before I go any further, I do want to say you also have to find a balance. There's I don't know, maybe 8 therapies listed on my list here, 9 therapies. And there's probably very few of us that could really truly get our children to 9 different therapies every single week and maintain sanity and still be able to care for the other people in our home or other people in our lives. That you do need to pick and choose what is most efficacious for your child. And that can be a little challenging, but again, that's where friends and teachers and people who've been there before, support groups can help you, as well as your doctor, and some of your key therapists can help. I mean, if for example, if you were a patient in our office, whichever therapist worked with you would definitely say, hey, have you thought about, let's look at this one. I think this might be something that's helpful. So let me just briefly talk about what these therapies are. The things that have proved the most effective for children with autism have to do with behavioral therapies. The big one that everybody talks about, and it's just fantastic for children on the spectrum, is ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis. ABA, basically, when you think about straight behaviorism, you're thinking about taking a behavior that is not what you want and replacing it with something else that's okay. So if a child on the spectrum struggles with hitting, maybe they're going to find a fidget that helps them keep their hands busy so they're not tempted to do that, or a coping skill or something, and then they go over it and over and over it and help them to replace that hitting with something else. That may be a teeny bit oversimplified, but that's in essence what they do, and that has proven really effective. That just working on these target behaviors, it's shown to be very effective. What we do here is actually based on what's called CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy. And when you think cognitive is thinking and behavioral is behavior, so when you oversimplifying a little bit here, but when you think about it, we're working on the whys as well. Why does your child, have tantrums? In addition to just, okay, here's the behavior plan. Here's how we're going to get rid of that behavior. Here's what we're going to do. Here's our goals, which is often something along the lines of finding something that they find really reinforcing, like extra video game time or time with mom or whatever it might be. And saying, okay, if you make this goal that we're working on, you do this, then you get this reinforcement. But there's a lot more to what we do than that. There's lots of play therapy happens. I mean, Dr. Josh jokes all the time that he gets paid for playing with dart guns. like Nerf guns. Boy, that sounded bad with Nerf guns, or puzzles, or, coloring, or whatever it is. But it's very, very individualized. So that's the kind of individual therapy that we do at Caitlin's place. We also do group therapy, which is based on social skills, and it's very adapted to who's in the group. They're grouped based on age and to some extent on similar behaviors, and it's everything from how to make a friend, what to do when someone's mean to you, how to keep your cool in difficult situations when you're disappointed. But they do a lot of practical application through Nerf gun wars and other things that at this time it's all Dr. Josh who does those, but it's very effective. There's also a great group therapy place over in Louisville, if you're interested in that. So I've got my handy dandy list. I forgot to tell you, I'm going to post this on our Facebook page. This is just a little guide sheet that we've made to help people in our area, but it can help you if you're not in our area too. What to do first, what to do once you have the diagnosis. And then here I'm getting into the list of therapies. So we've done ABA, individual therapy assessment, and group therapy. The other two big ones that you hear about all the time are group therapy and occupational therapy. Speech therapy and occupational therapy. So speech is just what it sounds like, that for many of our children, about, learning to say your THs correctly. And it's that, but when you're talking about those with developmental delays, it also does a great deal more. Anything that has to do with helping the child communicate effectively, whether it's verbally or through sign language or through visuals, and then also to receive language, to hear it, or to understand what other people are saying, whether it be verbally or through sign language or through visuals or whatever is effective for that child. Speech therapists are also ones that help with swallowing issues, which does come into play with developmental delays. Occupational therapy, I think it's one of the most misunderstood therapies. It is amazing. And I don't want to rank the therapies, but my children have made such strides through the efforts of occupational therapists. An OT's job is to help your child learn to do whatever it is that they need to do to function in life. So one of the OTs taught my child how to dress herself. They've helped with potty training. Anything from brushing teeth to tying shoes to throwing a ball. Occupational therapists, they're all in helping you help your child learn how to do those things. So those are kind of some of the big ones that people talk about. But I just want to briefly make you aware that there are other therapies available. You might have just heard my son in the background. There are other therapies available that can help too, that might be specialized to what you need. One of my children had developmental therapy through First Steps. He was struggling with crawling, and I remember she taught him how to crawl upstairs. And at the time I was like, why are you doing this to me? But he did need to learn that skill, and helped one of my child with some, the speech therapist at that time also helped my child with some swallowing issues. So very helpful. There's also physical therapy, and that's just what you think it is. But, with special needs kiddos, it may be, especially kiddos on the spectrum, they can either be really tight with their muscles or super loose with their core muscles and their extremities. And they might just need a little bit of focused effort on physically getting their body to where it needs to be. There's also recreational therapy. Sometimes people call it play therapy. Helps you learn how to play with others and interact well. And music therapy, you may have heard about that can be a really effective medium for some kids. To work on some of the things they need to work on. So a whole list, but again, don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel like you have to try everything all at once. It's very individual to the child, what they might need. The last thing I will mention, I should say, in Southern Indiana, there's a lot of providers that do this. We run into the interesting issue in our area, and I'm sure other metros and things on the border of states, this happens, but if your child has Indiana Medicaid, like if they have the waiver, then they don't have access to the therapies over in Louisville, and the ones in Louisville don't have access to therapies over here. There's a few exceptions to that, but it's usually medical and not these therapies. If your child has a secondary, like if Medicaid is their secondary and they have a primary insurance, then sure. But the one thing that really gets us in our area is when your child needs a little bit of psychiatric care, when they need medication, that some kiddos on the spectrum do. My daughter needs medicine, my son does not. I was very resistant to my daughter being put on medication. I thought surely if we kept going through these behavioral things, but I had a doctor that finally said, look, this particular medicine is in and out of her system in 24 hours. Let's just try it. And it was amazing. And he was so right. I would have never asked about it. I would have never suggested it, but he was right. I could see a calmness and a focus in her that wasn't there other times, that she had such difficulty with impulse control and OCD, which is kind of two of the main ones I hear about. And then some behavior problems can be a thing too. And the medicine really helps center her and makes the other therapies much more effective. So the one thing that if you are in our area, just so you know, if your child only has Medicaid, it's a little tricky. Indiana Medicaid, it's a little tricky on that psychiatric care because most of the pediatricians feel that's out of their purview to do psychiatric medication for children on the spectrum. And there are no psychiatrists or psychiatric nurse practitioners in our area that take Medicaid. So your choices are to pay cash or to travel to Bloomington. So hopefully that gets better soon. But there are some great places that are happy, that do a great job and will take cash. But that's a little bit of a challenge. We don't have our community mental health doesn't feel they're equipped to help with individuals on the spectrum. So unfortunately that's out. And again, the Louisville doctors are out if you only have Indiana Medicaid, but we can work around it. Call me, I'll help you brainstorm, we'll figure it out. Well, I hope that hasn't been too much overload, but I just I feel so passionate about helping people to understand what their options are and that there is help to come and that it's okay that not everything works all the time. There have been times where we have stepped away from speech or stepped away from OT because it was one thing too many, that they were getting lots of other good things. And at that time, it was the time to take a break. And then, we come back to it or we try something new. Like my son just tried recreational therapy for the first time and got some great benefit from that. So don't feel like, again, Rome wasn't built in a day. You don't have to have this all figured out at once, but please know that there are resources out there. There's things designed to help you and to help your child. And if we can be one of those, you call me, it doesn't matter if you need our services, and I'll talk to you if I can, and I'll help you if I can. But there's lots of things out there, and it's going to be okay. And your child has the ability to make great progress with your help. I will post this on our Caitlin's Place webpage, and in case that's helpful to you, and you have a lovely evening.